You've probably written std hundreds of times in your cool gambling programs and other stuff. However, this is not the same type of std that your uncle gave you. So what is it? The std in this case is a so-called namespace. Namespaces are used to keep functions and other things in order. It does this by helping to avoid name collision. Name collision happens when you have two things that are called the same thing. You see, if a program have two functions called the same thing, it won't work as it doesn't know what function to actually use. It's like when your 92-year-old grandma mixes up your and your brother's name. So whenever she calls on one of you, it can really be either of you, and you just have to do a 50-50. Namespaces help to avoid name collision by making us able to actually have functions called the same thing. This is weird, and this is a namespace. Whatever we write inside of the brackets, it's going to belong to the namespace. So whenever you see something that have a name and two colons before it, it means that this function can be found inside of the namespace. If we want to use a function defined inside of a namespace, we have to type the name of the namespace, then two colons, and then we can tell the program what we want to access inside of the namespace. In this case, the function. The std is an example of a namespace. The std actually stands for standard, and in this case it refers to C++ standard library for input and output. We then use two colons to tell the program that this actually is the name of whatever comes next. Finally, we tell the program what inside of the namespace we want to use. You can think of the namespace as different dimensions. In order to access the things inside these dimensions, we need a portal, and the colons act like one. We first tell the colons what dimension our function is in, and then what function we actually want to grab. If we now had the function called the same thing in another dimension or namespace, we can switch this out and tell the colons where the other function is. This way we technically have two functions called the same thing, but we have them in different namespaces, which means that the program can differentiate between them. Also remember that we still can't have two functions called the same in the same namespace, as the program won't know which of these functions we want to use. It would be like having twins and naming them the same thing. Now for all cool and attractive C users out there aren't namespaces, so you have to be a bit more careful. But I doubt that it will be a problem, since C users are far superior all other programmers. Another pretty cool thing is that you can have namespaces inside of namespaces. So if I want to access this function, I will write this. I'm grabbing the function out of the namespace, which I then grab after the other namespace. Now, you don't have to write this every time you're using a function in a namespace. You could also just tell the program that you're using the namespace. However, I wouldn't recommend that you do this. As you know, you might forget that you're using that, and then you're completely wondering why your program doesn't work, and then you start contemplating shooting up your school, and then YouTube gets blamed for it and gets shut down, and then I have to do this on something like Snapchat Reels, what the it's called. Instead, you could do the same thing but for specific things. So you could write using stdc out, and you'll be fine without having to spend the extra second it takes to write std. Finally, remember that namespaces aren't necessary to use, they just make things easier in some cases. Just like condoms. Ooh. If you have a smaller program, it's probably easier to just not create new namespaces. Okay, now a little segment dedicated to Lilu La 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 La, where I just show a program using namespaces as an example.
Okay guys, so to start off, we include libraries and create the main function. Next we create namespace called ha ha ha. Then I create a function called ASMR right clicking, which will, oh I don't know